It is one of the most crowded and vital waterways on the planet. The Strait of Hormuz is crucial for the world's oil and natural gas exports. And as the war with Iran spreads, tanker traffic has plunged.
The current situation in the Middle East portends the biggest oil market disruption on record. It could be several times the size of the disruptions we saw in the 1970s when we had the Arab oil embargo and the Iranian Revolution.
Iran has vowed to close the strategic waterway, targeting oil tankers that attempt to get through. The U.S. released images it says are strikes on Iranian mine-laying vessels, and Donald Trump warned against the use of mines. The U.S. president says he will keep the strait open.
And I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level.
Traffic in the Strait of Hormuz is now down to just a few Iranian tankers and independent shippers willing to take the risk. Experienced oil tanker captain Brett Whiteoak believes Donald Trump will struggle to keep ships steaming through the strait.
I'm not quite sure how he's going to do it. I think it's difficult. I mean, the Straits is 20 miles wide, but the corridor for the ships is only 2 miles, 2 nautical miles in and out, so it's quite narrow. The idea of standing on the bridge, navigating, knowing a drone could just run straight into the front of the bridge and kill you is real.
During the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, Whiteoak was a second mate on oil tankers that passed through the strait under cover of darkness, with all lights off.
What was it like to run in the Strait of Hormuz at night, completely dark?
I mean, for me, it was quite an adventure. I mean, all of a sudden, you're going from the Australian coast to be going up the Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea in a war zone. So it was all exciting. And at sunset of the day, all the ships would then run up through the straits and get to anchor off Dubai. And they'd all blacken the ships out, so there were no lights. And the Iranians then, it wasn't like today. There weren't drones and there weren't the missiles they have today, but most of the ships were hit by Iranian gunships that were hitting them. So at night, they couldn't tell what ship was what.
At the time, Whiteoak says the dangers of operating in the Strait of Hormuz were plain to see. This tanker was sunk by an Iraqi missile.
She was loading at Karg Island in Iran and was hit near the engine room by the missile, which is why she sunk. You'd get around to Dubai, anchor, and then in the morning, I remember we're sitting there at anchor off Dubai and the sun comes up and there's the ship right next to us and the whole of the accommodation's been blown apart.
The disruption to the flow of oil has seen crude prices fluctuate wildly, and not surprisingly, petrol prices jump up. Energy analyst Saul Kavanagh says despite the near shutoff of supplies from the Strait of Hormuz, this isn't a shock the market can't handle, yet.
There are mechanisms in place which can start to mitigate the impact. So the first one is Saudi and the UAE have got some infrastructure in place to get some of their oil exports out via the west, via the Red Sea, instead of the Strait of Hormuz.
Saudi Arabia has an east-west pipeline that can carry oil to the Red Sea, avoiding the Strait of Hormuz. Some of the UAE's oil can avoid the Hormuz pinch point through the Habshan pipeline, which carries crude for loading on the Gulf of Oman. Those diversions can only carry up to a quarter of what normally flows through the Strait of Hormuz. But the International Energy Agency has also proposed the largest release of strategic oil reserves in history to help stabilize oil prices. Kavanagh believes the market can absorb this shock for now.
When you start to add all these numbers up, you can mitigate the scope of this disruption down from 20 million barrels a day to perhaps only 5 million barrels a day, which is still very significant. But it would give the market some time to absorb, without having massive price spikes beyond what we've seen over the weekend, at least for a few months.
Kavanagh says these measures are a legacy of the oil shock 50 years ago, when wars and upheaval in the Middle East sent petrol prices soaring.
There was a big wake-up call for the oil industry back in the 70s when we had the Iranian revolution and we had the oil price spike in the wake of the Arab oil embargo. And things were put in place, such as strategic petroleum reserves in the wake of that, which still exist today. And so they're specifically designed to mitigate instances like this. And so I think it's important to note that the market is not and should not be panicking at this point.
If this war ends in 4 weeks, as Donald Trump has indicated, Kavanagh believes the market can bend without breaking. Longer than that, and prices for just about everything Australians buy will rise.
If we see a prolonged disruption here, you're still looking at quite high oil prices, perhaps even higher than today's levels for a prolonged period of time. And that actually has a bigger economic impact, right? Because then it starts to filter through to, it's not just the price we're paying to fill up our cars at the petrol station. It's about the cost of every good and service, because nearly everything is made one way or another with oil and gas.